So today I am super excited because I'm going to be discussing a movie that I have been dying to see for the longest time. And now that I've gotten what I've wanted, I'm kind of not sure how to feel about it. And the movie in question is Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. It's a Czechoslovakian movie from the 70s about a girl named Valerie who gets her first period and is kind of going through the process of becoming a woman. And she ends up being gifted this magical pair of earrings that help protect her from vampires, evil priests, and more strange people in general. So my initial interest in this movie actually came from, once again, kind of like when I talked about American Beauty, aesthetic edits that I had seen of this movie. And the movie itself looked like an absolute dream. When I say aesthetic edits, I mean if you looked up like fantasy movie edits or like cottagecore edits, anything like that, you would have seen this movie. And honestly, you probably have seen clips of this movie. You maybe have not seen the movie, but you have most definitely seen shots of this movie because this movie is so dreamy. And when I tell you the internet really took these edits of this movie and put them everywhere, they did. You have seen shots of this movie. Another reason why I really was into this movie is because I saw someone online describe it as fantasy menstrual horror, and I was like, oh my god, that's everything I've ever wanted in a movie. So I was like, all right, we're gonna watch this. The movie actually did end up surprising me though, because it really doesn't play out as straightforward as it sounds. The plot is very confusing, and I found myself searching online afterwards trying to make sure I processed the movie right. So visually, however, this movie is absolutely incredible. I think there is something hidden in these psychedelic films of the 60s and 70s that you really can't find today. There's something so dreamy and beautiful. I don't know if it's because they had like limited resources, so these movies end up looking just visually different, but it's gorgeous. You watch this movie and there's not really any crazy effects. You see a little bit of makeup, but a lot of the magic of this movie really comes from the whimsicalness of our main character, Valerie, kind of experiencing the world in a new way, and also in the landscape and the set of this movie. This movie takes place in like a quaint village, and you see really beautiful light shots throughout the whole movie. You constantly are seeing green fields and flowers, and there's a certain lightness to this whole movie. It's not heavy, like, at all. And everyone is really only dressed in white or pastels and with a couple of black outfits here and there. And it almost feels like you've stumbled upon this really beautiful cult. But the cult is so beautiful, you want to stay. The movie also feels very much like a fairy tale. It's like the most incredible fairy tale you've ever seen. When I think of the fantasy genre, I want to put this film in it as the poster child and name no other, simply because visually how stunning it was and how it made me feel. Now we gotta talk about the plot. So the plot of this movie, however, is so confusing to me. I understood that Valerie was being preyed upon by these vampires and people wanting to suck the youth out of her, which is a very feminine experience if you ask me. But I also wonder if I was lost because there was a lot of folklore elements in this film, and I don't know the most about Czech folklore. I don't know anything about Czech folklore. I also kind of wonder if this is one of those films that it really isn't supposed to make sense. It's kind of just supposed to be fun. I think when it comes to myself and how I consume movies, I maybe need to be a little bit more forgiving and maybe even explore more movies like this, because maybe there's not a point. Maybe there's not a hidden meaning. Maybe the point of this movie is just to enjoy it for what it is. One thing I did see online while looking up stuff about this movie is that during this time when Czechoslovakia still existed, there was a lot of surreal, dreamy movies like this coming out because filmmakers wanted to put something out against all of the communist propaganda films that were coming out at the time. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe that had something to do with why this film is the way that it is. Overall, I want to give the movie a 7 out of 10 because I really loved it. I can also, however, see why it's not for everyone. There's some really questionable and awkward nude and intimate scenes in this movie as well, so proceed with caution with who you watch this movie with, because it does get weird and there's not enough plot to explain why it's that weird. I will say this, if you are someone who is an artist, I highly recommend checking out this movie. I felt myself being inspired creatively by it, and I just know other people will too when you watch this movie, because this movie really does feel like a dream that you don't want to wake up from.